So Bren, welcome. We're so happy to have you on this Zoom meeting to talk about Greenwave and your journey to restore the ocean. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks. I'm honored to be here. It's been a long time, right? It's been a real while, and thanks so much for doing the amazing film. You took so much care and artistry in it. So
Well, we're uh, we care a lot about this issue of restoring not only our oceans but our planet. So we came across your story a long time ago. Lindsay Richardson, who is my co-director and producer, had been telling me about you for probably 5 years before we actually, came and interviewed you. So that was amazing. But what I really wanted to talk about today was some of the some of the things that you've been doing since we interviewed you, which was back in 2020. It's a while ago.
a long time ago, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And just give us a brief outline of Green Wave, what
Yeah.
you are attempting to achieve with your Green Wave nonprofit ocean farming site, and then especially your kelp fund and your seaweed fund. So there's
Mhm.
two different funds. And if you could just tell us briefly what those are for and how they work.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's been a while. Um, you know, Greenwave's a nonprofit, and we created it because we thought early in this industry there needed to be sort of a pre-competitive space, like a space just for collaboration.
Mhm.
And it started out just training 5 or 6 people a year, and then 8,000 people signed up for the farmer training program. So my co-founder and I, Emily Stengel, were like, "Whoa, we have to take this more seriously, right?" And so we developed 4 programs, and the first one is farmer training and support, and we built this hub that now has 6,000 users on it. And that's open source videos, training. It's got a community where people are arguing about anchor size to blue carbon, right? Like it's exactly what you uh, uh, would hope for, farm design tools. So that's like the open source piece. We have a farmer mentorship program where experienced farmers are supporting early farmers, things like that. Um, then the second is the Kelp Climate Fund, which you mentioned, and that's a climate subsidy program where we believe that farmers should be paid for the work they do to improve the environment, right? Markets don't do that, right? They don't price it in. And so the way it works is farmers get paid up to $25,000 per farm to plant their seed. And in return, they collect data. So they take pictures of their kelp. We have sort of the Facebook of kelp now with 47 farms around the country. It's a $500,000 program. And they take physical measurements. And what's interesting about that is we're able to track the benefits, like the environmental benefits, nitrogen, carbon, stuff like that, through that data collection. And farmers are able to track yields and quality and things like that. We've created this sort of culture of data, but around the subsidy, which is good.
Bran, I realize that some of our viewers may not have seen you in the film. So maybe we could back up a little bit and explain what ocean farming is
Yeah.
and why this matters to the planet.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely. It's kind of hard to, it's a weird place to grow food, right? Underwater. We can't see what we grow. I can't swim. We don't have much control, right? But the reason it makes sense and it's sort of time has come is that, listen, our land-based food system's being pushed out to sea because of water crisis, because of the nutrient crisis on land. We will, and population rise, we will be eating more food from the ocean. Our wild fishery can't bear that burden, right? No question about that. So we're going to be farming the sea. The question is, what crops do we grow? Who's going to farm it? And is there an opportunity as we're building something new to bend it in the right way, right?
Mhm.
Like to actually have it be an industry that we're proud of, that's like beautiful, that supports communities, is horizontal, not vertical in terms of growth, things like that. So and so that's sort of like the context of why now. And so when you ask the ocean what to grow as a farmer. It says, why don't you grow things that don't swim away and you don't have to feed? Right. And so as soon as you get over this fish obsession and you realize shellfish and seaweed grow by the nutrients that are naturally in the water, or seaweed through sunlight, that means zero inputs. So no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed, land, things like that, which makes it the most sustainable food on the planet. But also all these crops capture carbon, nitrogen, they rebuild reefs. So they're not just sustainable, they're breathing life back into the ocean. So it's a pretty simple idea, like grow things that don't swim away. And then all we do is we use ropes and buoys and anchors, a rope scaffolding system underwater to grow our crops. Like it is simple. It's a willow, not an oak. And that's the idea. Like complexity doesn't work in the ocean so well. We got to work with the ocean, not against it.
But what you actually grow is kelp and then shellfish.
Yep.
Correct?
So it's kelp, which is a type of seaweed, oysters, mussels, clams, and scallops, a crop for all seasons. It's really important that this is polyculture. I mean, Mother Nature does not operate as a monoculture ecosystem, right? And what's amazing is if you grow kelp next to mussels, for example, you get a 20% higher yield of mussels. So these species don't compete for nutrients. They actually, work together. And from a farmer perspective, that's a great business model. You're increasing yields through diversity.
One thing that I read your book. To be honest, I haven't read absolutely every page, but I've read most of it. I love your book. It is one of the best books I've ever read. I sent it to my sons because they're wild men. Trying to find their way, and I think we're a wild man still on. But let's talk about that book. And just very briefly, we don't have time to go into your whole story, but first of all, I want to say the name. I'm going to read it because I just want to make sure I get it right. Eat Like a Fish, The Adventures Farming the Ocean to Fight Climate Change. This came out in May 2020, which was right after we had interviewed you.
Yeah, exactly.
But your journey, what's interesting to me, besides you being a wild man, is going from deep sea fishing to aquaculture to kelp. Can you tell us in a couple of sentences why that was your journey?
Yeah. I mean, all I ever wanted to be was a fisherman, right? Those are my heroes. Dropped out of high school when I was 14 and went to fish. The trouble was it was the height of industrialized fishing. So I've been on this journey like all of us. There is nobody like innocent in this journey of ecological redemption, right? That we all need to go through of finding our proper relationship to the oceans and to the land. And so I went into salmon aquaculture after I left the wild fisheries. And that was everything a solution should not be, pig farms at sea. And then I ended up to this like place where like, okay, if we don't grow fish, what should we grow? And that's where it landed after, talking to many people. I didn't invent anything. It's all about sharing, stealing, learning, growing shellfish and seaweed really, really just made sense when you thought about the ocean as a unique agricultural space.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about ocean farming here with you, we are not talking about salmon farming, which is what people will automatically go to if they hear that word, ocean farming. And what was one thing that struck me, I didn't really know this, was that the salmon farming is often they're fed food, which comes from, I want you to correct me if this is wrong, that comes from wild fish, correct?
Absolutely. Like I mean, I've heard this stat that half of all China's wild fishery now goes into fish feed for aquaculture. Like it's we're to grow, like a pound of salmon, it requires more wild fish than like a more wild fish. What's interesting that now is, so to grow salmon, you need wild fish and they're using soy and other like large scale commodities. And essentially the fish are becoming equivalent to like diabetic. So health costs of keeping the fish healthy because of disease and sickness and stuff, because of the bad feed, has gotten higher than feed costs. So that doesn't make sense, but like we're feeding the fish trash. It's like a soy diet. So it just makes no sense. And, you know, the mistake aquaculture made was no one meant it on purpose, but they grew around existing tastes of salmon and tunas and like existing markets and try to feed that. And instead, what we need to do is be like, okay, what does it make sense to grow and then shift markets, which is hard to do, but that's our journey on the planet now, right? Like, start with the earth and then shift markets around it.
So tell us a little bit about the kelp fund, because your farmers are growing kelp, of course, and then this I understand the market for shellfish,
Yeah.
but the market for kelp, and you have a fund that helps the ocean farmers who are growing kelp and the shellfish to find their buyers. Could you
Yep.
talk a little bit about that?
Exactly. So the Kelp Climate Fund, its role is to subsidize, so farmers can scale. They can, if they lose a contract, they can, if there's a storm, like it's a cushion, right? Then there's Seaweed Source, which is our sort of our marketplace. We have 52 companies on there, and that's where we like find good buyers and farmers that can produce high quality supply and matchmakers to do forward contracting. We believe that no farmer should grow without a forward contract in place. What's interesting about the market is that there's you know, shellfish prepackaged in the water, existing market. Kelp, really fast growing, but like what are we going to do with it, right? And what's emerged is that there's the plant-based diet for sure, like, you know, kelp mushroom burgers. That's one piece. But to me, what's really interesting is this sort of it as a replacement ingredient. So the ingredient prices are going up around the world, like, you know, soy prices, corn prices, everything. And so kelp, which is very affordable to grow because it doesn't require fresh water and stuff like that, can be a replacement, sort of low carbon replacement in the ingredients chain. That's one thing. And then the other big piece here is the biostimulant space. So, and this is, I think, a major, since we've talked last, it's really expanded to a whole nother level and bridging land and sea. So whenever there's been a nutrient crisis on land, we've leached too much soil, farmers have turned to the ocean to get nutrients. So in New England, what happened was that like New England farmers leached all the nutrients out of the land after a couple hundred years. So then they went to baitfish, Menhaden, and they had Menhaden factories to do fertilizer all up and down the coast. So what's really interesting now is taking kelp, fermenting it, turning into a biostimulant. And what the science shows is if you take kelp biostimulant and put it on land-based crops, you know, apples, things like that, you get drought and heat tolerance, like the hormones and stuff. And so this idea that in the ocean we can grow things that provide climate resilience for regenerative land-based farmers and creates a market for us is, and think of that sort of as our waste stream. So Greenwave is just playing this role of like a wedge organization trying to solve and be responsive to those choke points that farmers are facing. Another example would be seed. Like we're very worried about the privatization of seed at this point, but large corporations taking it over. So Greenwave has started doing farmer-owned seed banks where so here in New England, farmers bring us their seed, we're able to store it, bulk it up, and then they have that available, and it's not owned by major corporations. So it's interesting, as a nonprofit, we've just been because we can plan and see what happened on land, the bad stuff, we can be like, oh, okay, let's make sure farmers own their own seed right now, right? As opposed to dealing with it, you know, a decade from now.
Oh, that's so great. I love it. I'm just looking at our time just to make sure we're good, but can you give us in a couple of sentences, or it's big ask. The climate, how does growing kelp and the shellfish in the ocean, can you give us the sort of tagline about the $20,000 and all that, and also what it does in terms of climate mitigation specific?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think there's three important things for a climate solution. One is that it's regenerative, right? So kelp, you know, soaks up more carbon than land-based plants. It's like the sequoia of the sea. oysters filter 50 gallons of water a day. Like, these are Mother Nature's technologies to keep ecosystems alive. So we should grow them. The second key element of a climate solution is that it's replicable. So the farms are very cheap to build because it's just ropes, buoys, and anchors. So, like, depending on the depth, $20,000, $50,000, you can start your own farm, be up and growing. And that allows us to move quickly, right? This is a cheap climate solution, right? That's its competitive advantage. And then the third is it's scalable. Like, it can't be small as beautiful. It can't be big as necessary. It has to be replication, but scalable. And so, if you were to farm 4% over networked through U.S. waters, you could replace all the carbon emissions of the California's agricultural sector. So, like, this can add up to something big. We have to do it the right way. We got to figure out how to plan it, things like that. But those three things, that's regenerative, that's replicable, and scalable, is why I believe this really has a future.
So one last question, actually. You won a very big award a couple of years ago. I think it was I'm going to get this, I'm going to look at this, the Kurt Bearfor Food Planet Award for $2 million in 2021.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit of how you've used that money and are continuing to use it and what that meant to you.
Absolutely. Life is a weird journey. I'll say that. That's not what this was not the plan, right? But no, it was a real honor. I think they really tried to invest in solutions. We were able to use the money for for building seed banks, working on things like stabilization for farmers. We were able to train and bring people around from around the country and around the world for farmers, learning from farmers. We did like a nursery. We're building like nurseries for farmers around the country. So there was just, what it did was it took sort of our program and our planning, and we were able to take a leap in scale and impact. So it came at really the right time. And it was a big part of our Kelp Climate Fund, where we weren't talking about like $1,000 here and there for farmers, but big chunks that could actually move the needle, allow them to scale.
Yeah. I have one last question. What is your goal and your hope for for spreading the word about this and for creating these ocean farming places? Because at one point I heard back when we were interviewing you that there were people from all over the world who were calling on you to say, hey, come to our country. Is that something that you still have as a goal?
Yeah. So I think one of our goals was to move this community of passion, which has been quite large, and you move it in a community of practice, like real farms, real hatcheries, people growing, and really finding those people and really working with those. And so, and the hub has really worked there. Our vision is one of reefs, right? So 25 to 50 farms in an area, processing hub, hatchery, rings of entrepreneurs, and then you replicate those wherever there's a Home Depot, right? And we wanted to go deep, not broad. So we've really stayed in North America pretty much, because what we don't want to do is export sort of half-baked solutions.
Mm-hmm.
That said, we have a program in New Zealand, and we're doing some work in Argentina. The Argentina work is there because they're taking a marine park and trying to reforest the kelp forests. And so that's a really interesting role for a farmer, as doing reforestation, right? Same kind of work and stuff like that. And then in New Zealand, there's been a massive water grant to the Maori of about 10,000 hectares from the government for ocean farming. And so they invited us in to play a modest technical role there. So we're doing some, but it's important not to get spread too thin, right? And really, climate solutions are hard. I don't want to oversell this. Like, we could do hours and hours of the challenges and worries, conversation. Stuff's hard, but it's fun. It's a fun space. I hope anybody would, come join the climate solution space. It's creative, frustrating, but it's a good way to if we all burn and die, it'll be a great way to close up.
Well, you'll know that you've done something that's really powerful and important in the climate space, not to mention the food space. So
Yeah.
I applaud you, and you're one of my absolute heroes.
Oh, geez.
Thank you so much
Well,
for being
thank
in
you
the
for bundling us with all these other amazing folks in the film. Like, it was such an honor to be included in that, and just, those are the folks I'm learning from, and I think really give me hope, these bundle of solutions to move us to the next stage.
So before we leave, I just want to mention again, this is Bren Smith, who founded Greenwave, which is a climate, it's a food, you say it, Bren, you're going to say it better
Yeah.
than.
So Greenwave's a nonprofit, and we're training the next generation of regenerative ocean farmers.
Excellent. And his book, which I absolutely adore, is Eat Like a Fish, My Adventures. My adventures farming the ocean to fight climate change. And
Yeah.
the book is available anywhere you can find a book. It's a great book.
Yeah.
Our film, Bren is in our film, and that film is called To Which We Belong, and you can find our film on a number of platforms. It is called To Which We Belong, as I said. And so we're just doing follow-ups with Bren. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. It was so great to touch base again.
Yeah, you too.
All
Okay,
right.
bye.
Bye-bye.